What is going on out there, peeps? Man, you know what? Look at there's a lot of things that I cover in here, and I cover it because I'm just trying to bring awareness to you. I told everybody about a thing called a bail-in. It's different than a bailout. So when banks get bailed out, basically the government uses taxpayer dollars to give them money to make sure that they don't fail. A bail-in, on the other hand, is when they just take your damn money that you put in the bank, all of it. All of it. Whether you have $10 or you have $10 million. They take it all from you and they appropriate it. Laws were changed in 2017 that allowed banks to do this. They did a test run in a place called Cyprus. And I told everybody, you guys have to pay attention to this video I did. It's called Lessons from Cyprus. Somebody said, yeah, but Pimpy, man, I've been with you since the beginning. And you did that when you only had like 10,000 subscribers. What you should do is redo the video and just record the video again. And I did. See this right here? It says Lessons from Cyprus, redo. I cannot stress enough to you how important that is to watch. And I warned everybody way back when I first filmed it that what happened in Cyprus, in my opinion, was a test run. And that they were going to do this worldwide. Now, having said that, I want to make something perfectly clear. When it comes to Nasera Jasera, that would save us from what happened in Cyprus. But I told you guys, I wasn't lying about this. There's only one person I trust to do that. So having said that, if we don't get him back in office and don't give him control of the House and the Senate, then we are looking forward to what this is, which is a bail-in. Real quick, so you guys understand, we have Pimpy's Investment Chat. It's the same name as the YouTube channel. Please come join us. I'll leave a link in the description. It is free to join. We do talk about foreign investment currencies, gold, silver, cryptocurrencies, the whole 9 yards. Also have another group called The Hidden Things in Front of Your Eyes, which deals with current events, as well as those things that you might consider conspiracy, 9/11, false flag events, the whole 9 yards. Go watch my Lessons from Cyprus. It's important because you get to hear from the citizens. These are people that had millions of dollars in the bank, and it was taken from them. Let me repeat that. They took their damn money. But guess what? But some of it was insured. $150,000 was insured. So at least they got the $150,000 back. So if you had, if you had $150,000 in there, then you're like, cool, I get all my money back. But if you had anything above that, you lost everything above $150,000. I showed you in the video. There's people that had millions of dollars in the bank and lost it all. Now here's the injury to insult. They were nice enough to give these people back the insured amount, at least, which is $150,000. But they charged them freaking taxes on top of that. The government did. So not only did they steal your money, but the money you did get back, they charged you taxes on top of that. So I said, look, this is a prelude to what's coming. I told you, in my opinion, I felt, and even the people of Cyprus said, look, we feel that this is a practice run. They literally were just seeing what would happen if they did this. And then I told you, guess what? It's going to happen more. And guess what has happened? Australia and India are using the Rona as a stupid excuse to do a bail-in. Look, these economies were already crashing. They put the coronavirus on us, murdered people. They did. People died. Just so they can have an excuse for their piss poor money management and money policy decision making is what had happened. So I'm going to show you what happened in Australia. Thank you. and cover it because it's important for you to know. And you need to go back and learn and listen to the people and what they tell you happened to them in this video here, Lessons from Cyprus. Before we can get into that, you have to know what is the repo market. So listen, because you'll learn.
The repo market is often referred to as the plumbing of the financial system. And just like the plumbing in your home, you're unlikely to think about how it operates each day until something goes wrong with it. So you'd be forgiven if you had no idea just how important the repo market was until you started hearing about all the issues with it in the financial news last year. But this is a market that has a turnover of $1 to $2 trillion per day. So it's pretty big. Repo stands for repurchase agreement and is basically a form of short-term borrowing where securities, and especially government securities, are used as collateral. The reason this is called a repurchase agreement rather than just a collateralized loan is down to the way the transaction is done. Essentially, the repo market is like a huge pawn shop. That's pawn with a W. So let's say you have Bank A, which is holding a lot of cash, more than they need, and you have Bank B that has some treasury bonds but needs to raise cash. In a repurchase agreement, Bank B will sell its treasury bonds to Bank A, but the agreement will state that Bank B will repurchase the treasury bonds back from Bank A at a later point in time for a higher price. This is usually overnight or within 48 hours, but it can sometimes be longer. Now, since Bank B is buying the treasuries back for a higher price, the difference between the price it sold them for and the price it buys them back for is the equivalent of paying interest for borrowing the money. This implied interest is known as the repo rate. In situations where there is demand for borrowing in the repo market, but not enough lending available, the repo rate will increase. Now, this, in very basic terms, is what happened in September 2019, but we'll get into the reasons for that in another video. The party that's lending the money, in this case Bank A, will be institutions such as banks and money market funds. The borrowers, Bank B, will be institutions like investment banks, hedge funds, and brokers. The Federal Reserve will also be involved in the repo market to help regulate bank reserves and the money supply. But typically, the lender's motivation for taking part in this deal is to make a relatively risk-free short-term return on its money. The reason this is relatively risk-free is because the securities are held as collateral. This means that if the borrower institution can't repurchase the securities as agreed, the lender can sell the securities in the market to make its money back. With this in mind, the value of the securities will always be higher than the amount of money they are being bought for. The difference between the value of the securities and the money exchanged is known as the haircut. If there is greater risk involved in the deal, the lender may ask for a larger haircut and a higher repo rate. It's these transactions at a huge scale that allow the market to function smoothly. It allows financial institutions to obtain liquidity for their day-to-day needs and facilitates all kinds of trading. So, there's your 3-minute explainer of the repo market, more or less 3 minutes. If you like this video, please do hit the thumbs up.
Okay, so now you know what the repo market is. Basically, they take securities. Okay, so one bank has more money than they need, and another bank needs the money, but they have securities. And so what happens is the bank will lend less money than there is securities, guaranteed that they get their money back. That's important to know. Now, I know when it comes to the lessons from Cyprus, when we talk about bail-ins, I've had conversations about whether or not credit unions are somehow safer than banks. Well, come to find out, guess what? They're not. But before we get into that, let's get into some of these other things. Look at this. This is India. What is India doing? They are doing a bail-in. And they're doing it through the back door. This is India. India's already doing a bail-in. But right now, what we're talking about is Australia. So listen to what these people have to say because it's important. You need to know this.
Welcome to the Citizens Report for the 13th of March 2020. I'm Elisa Barwick. Joining me today is Citizens Party Victoria State Chairman Jeremy Beck. Welcome, Jeremy.
Thanks, Elisa.
And on today's show, GFC Mark II. Bail-in is now a clear and present danger. And in a health crisis, economic liberalism and green fascism are deadly.
Do you hear what he's saying? What she's saying? Liberalism, the Democrats, and green fascism, the Green New Deal. Do any of these things sound familiar to you? I just want to throw that out there. Those become a clear and present danger as they push us into communism.
So first item, GFC Mark II, bail-in is now a clear and present danger. So we're approaching the Ides of March. Anything could happen. I think that we probably no longer have to convince our viewers that there's a new global financial crisis underway. And look, it's not the coronavirus. Robbie Barwick tweeted this morning that coronavirus is like a stray ember blown into a gunfire magazine. So that just happens to be the trigger, but our economy has been shot for a long time, and this is just showing up the reality of that, and we have to react to it fast. And we're going to talk a bit more about the solutions, because all the solutions are actually ready to go. We can implement them very quickly. So we'll come back to that. But first of all, the Dow Jones had already collapsed 20% of its value from recent peaks, and we've just heard from the close of markets from trading in the US yesterday that it has lost 10%, which is bigger than even pre-1987. Europe just had the worst trading day in history. Deutsche Bank shares have plunged below limits that certain analysts had been saying were danger zone for the continued existence of Deutsche Bank. That's below a share value of €5.
And Deutsche Bank is the bank that the International Monetary Fund had said that could trigger off a global financial crisis. And they've got around $50 trillion in derivatives. This is really very concerning of the contagion that could spread.
Okay, so you guys heard this before. The one bank that everybody is eyeballing, forget everything else. Everybody keeps an eye on Deutsche Bank. We've seen several arrests, several deaths, several suicides, and the possibility of Deutsche Bank filing bankruptcy. This would trigger a worldwide catastrophe, is what it would do. Okay? So, when they're talking about Deutsche Bank, we all watch that. Anybody and everybody that has anything to do with currencies, you should be aware of this. Okay? Because you can see this graph, all the different banks that are affected by what the hell goes on with Deutsche Bank. Okay?
Absolutely. It's one of the most systemically interconnected banks with its derivatives portfolio globally. So the US Federal Reserve clearly knows what's at stake here. They've just announced an intervention through the US, the New York Federal Reserve repo operations. Yesterday they offered $1 trillion in two lots of 1 month and 3 month repurchase agreements, and today they were offering a further trillion.
Did you say trillion? This is incredible.
Yeah.
Trillion, not billion. This is huge.
1.5 trillion over 2 days. Now, it wasn't all taken up yesterday. 78 billion was taken up. But what the New York Fed has said is that they will continue making that offering of 1 to 1.5 trillion each week in these 1 month and 3 month short-term liquidity offerings. And this is on top of, mind you, the existing repo arrangements which we've discussed in previous shows of overnight lending to the tune of 175 billion and 2 weekly lending to the tune of 45 billion. So it might not have all been taken up, but they know what they're going to need in the coming period ahead, which is why they're making regular offerings. Now, this is on top of the UK, which has just cut rates to 0.25%. Europe will make further cuts. The US already made an extraordinary cut, and Australia has recently made a cut.
So Australia is on the verge of a bail-in. India has done a bail-in. They're talking about the UK doing a bail-in. Now, for those of you who are out there that listen to my videos on the dinar as well as the Vietnam dong, now if you want to avoid all these bail-ins, all you need to do is change those damn rates. It would kickstart the economies around the world. You would create a ton of new millionaires who would go out and spend their newfound fortune creating jobs and kickstarting economies. I warned people that this was coming and that Cyprus was just the guinea pigs. Okay, as usual, I'll leave a link to all these things so you guys can come and check it out for yourself. Okay, but let's get into this more because it's important. Because Australia is now doing the bail-in.
So part 3. Yes, we are here to talk about part 3 of our 3-part bail-in series. And this is perhaps, Martin, the most important part of what we've been discussing. So just to recap for the audience, we talked about deposit insurance in part 1. Part 2, we talked about the difference between bail-in and the deposit insurance scheme and how those two different elements interact. And now we're going to talk about the risk of bail-in. Here's where when we get called conspiracy theorists by pushing this, we're going to present today some very solid evidence. So in 2019, we had HSBC. They did some dramatic things with their changing their terms and conditions for their main retail deposit account. And we're going to actually talk about what they did and why that's significant. And then we're going to start having a broader conversation about the big 4 banks because there was some significant changes in 3 of the big 4. And then there were also some second tier banks like Bank of Queensland and some of the credit unions of the world.
So do you hear what they're saying? So they just changed a lot of the rules and regulations. And in most places, people don't even realize this has happened. And you hear what he said, including the secondary market, which includes credit unions. So in other words, no place is safe from a bail-in if it happens. Okay? I think we're we're probably one election away from a possible bail-in. Depends on who gets into office. Make no doubt about it. The purpose of the bail-in is to save the bankers once again. That same political party back in 2008 or 2009 did this bail-in. Instead of bailing out the people, which is us, they bailed out the banks. So make no doubt about it. If that same political party gets into office, they will once again do a bail-in. And that means they take all your money. All your retirement accounts, all your banking accounts, anything and everything that you have sitting in with a bank is then taken from you and appropriated for the necessity of saving the banks. And there's nothing you could do about it. Nothing, because these are the laws.
Massive changes to terms and conditions last year. And so last year I wrote an article about this issue, a 2-part series I wrote from my own website. And part 1 we showed in our part 2 about the issue between the bail-in and deposit insurance, and now we're going to go into what's actually happened with these terms and conditions. So we have seen bail-in happen in 2012-13 in Cyprus, where deposits was confiscated. We've seen in terms of the G20, they have been pushing a global regime around bail-in because they said that after the global financial crisis, the requirement for governments to bail out the banks was too significant from a financial standpoint, so they need a new mechanism.
You heard the same? So the G20 got together and said, look, in 2008, the bailout was too much for us. So what they're saying is a bail-in. That means any retirement accounts you have, any stocks, any bonds, any safe deposit, anything like that. If you don't have the cash in your possession, if you don't have gold and silver in your possession, they confiscate it. They take it from you. The only thing you get back is that amount of money that's insured. But in Cyprus's case, they got that amount back, but then they taxed them for it.
And so this is where the Financial Stability Board looked at, what are the options around bail-in, and obviously when the G20 meeting happened in Brisbane, all of the signatories of the G20 signed up to a global framework around bail-in, including us. So we have New Zealand, that is the most transparent of the regimes around the world, saying that you as the depositor you must assume responsibility for the risk of putting your money in the bank, and you have to determine that risk.
You hear that? They're saying it is up to you, and you make the risk by trusting the banks. That's your fault. That's not the bank's fault. You hear what they're saying? That's your fault for not trusting the banks, or for trusting the banks. And because you trusted the banks and something should happen, that is your risk, not the bank's risk. They're saying it's your risk. You should have known better.
And obviously, you know, this sort of the bail-in policy is happening all over the world. It's only here where, because there was a stink when the legislation was passed in 2018, there's been a denial that retail deposit accounts can be touched. And obviously, we've seen the head of APRA.
He's saying this is happening already all around the world. I told you when I did that Lessons from Cyprus, I felt like this was some type of test run. I told you guys, I felt like this was some type of test run. In the video, the people said, we can't help but feel, the citizens, we can't help but feel this is some type of weird test run. And sure enough, it's starting to happen.
Wayne Byers testified to Parliament to say that there is no such power to bail in, and yet you and I have found a loophole that we have exposed last year, this year, in 2019, and so obviously, and to repeat the point that we made in our last show, bail-in has happened already in this country. So anyone who's saying that this can never happen, this won't happen, if we get into a financial crisis, I mean, we have a history of doing this throughout this country. And as the great saying goes, those who don't learn the lessons of history tend to repeat it.
And that's what's going on. So, once again, I cannot stress to you the importance. If we, as holders of the Iraqi dinar and the Vietnam dong, we somehow manage to benefit from a rate change. I told you guys in those videos, I don't trust that they're giving it to us because they know they're just going to turn around and take it right back. That's what I told everybody in the video. I go, look, people are like, well, how can they afford the rate change? I go, why? Because they know. They don't care. They're saying to them, so what? Let them benefit from the rate change, and then we'll take it right back in the form of what is known as a bail-in. You need to have about 3 or 6 months worth of currency to pay for your bills while we figure out what the hell is going on, and we go from the old system to the new system. But as for the rest of my money, I don't care how many millions you get. I don't care if you have 100, 200, 500, $1 billion. I don't give a crap what it is. You need to find a way to secure that money. And the only way that's going to happen is through physical gold and silver. Buy a large ass safe. If you got enough money, then buy a damn shipping container, bury it somewhere out on your property, and then store your gold and silver in there. Do whatever you need to do to protect your wealth. Once we go to the other side, then you can sell the gold and silver and start getting whatever the new currency is on the other side, and you'll be way wealthy where a lot of people are going to be struggling. I brought this up because I told everybody from the Lessons from Cyprus that this was going to start happening. And now it's happening in India. This is happening in Australia. And now they're saying, hey, it's about to start everywhere. Okay? So I'm not doing this as a scare tactic. I'm doing this as a warning. When you get your money, and we're going to get it, but don't make any mistake about it. They're going to try to find a way to take it back from you. Don't let them do that. Try to find a way to buy as much gold and silver as possible. I don't give a shit what you got to do. Find a way and protect your wealth. All right, you guys, I just wanted to share this with you because this is round 2 and it's already gone. If you like what's going on, hit the like button. If you're not a subscriber, please do so because it does help out the channel. I'll catch you later.